My name is Clara Thornton, and at 32, I find myself in the quiet, often solitary position of stewarding a legacy. It's a role I never asked for, but one my grandfather, Arthur, prepared me for my entire life. He was a man carved from the same sturdy oak he used in his first pieces of furniture, a craftsman who believed that integrity was a tangible thing, something you could feel in the smooth, hand-sanded grain of a tabletop or the perfect joinery of a chair. From his small workshop in the back of our family home in Willow Creek, he built Thornton and Finch Artisanal Goods, a company dedicated to sustainable, handcrafted home furnishings. By the time I was born, Thornton and Finch was no longer just a workshop. It was a respected name, a symbol of quality and quiet environmentalism. While other children were given dolls and toy trucks, Grandpa Arthur gave me blocks of reclaimed maple and taught me to feel the story in the wood. "Everything has a history, Clarabelle," he would say, his voice a low, gentle rumble like stones shifting in a riverbed. "The rings of a tree, the lines on a person's face. You have to learn to read them. And most importantly, you have to protect your own roots. Not everyone who admires the tree wants to see it flourish." I spent my summers not at camp, but at the company, absorbing its ethos. I learned about sustainable forestry from our suppliers, about fair wages in the finishing department, and about honest marketing from Grandpa himself. He groomed me not to be a ruthless executive, but a thoughtful caretaker. When he passed away peacefully 3 years ago, surrounded by the scent of lavender and old books, my world felt unmoored. The reading of his will anchored me again, but in a way I never expected. He left me his controlling interest, 75% of Thornton and Finch, then valued at a gentle but significant $18.4 million. The remaining shares were placed in a trust for the longtime employees, the artisans who were the company's true heart. He said you had his hands, but your grandmother's heart, his lawyer and the company's co-founder, Mr. Alastair Finch, told me, his eyes misty behind his spectacles. He trusted you to care for the forest, not just count the trees. I stepped into the role of CEO with a quiet determination to honor that trust. I didn't change my life. I continued to live in my small, airy loft in a restored textile mill overlooking the creek. I drove my modest, reliable sedan and channeled a significant portion of the company's profits and my own into local conservation projects, always anonymously. My life was calm, ordered, and deeply private. It was a life of quiet stewardship, just as Grandpa Arthur had intended. And then I met Leo. It was at a Saturday farmer's market, a riot of color and sound under the sprawling branches of ancient oak trees. I was admiring a potter's work, tracing the delicate, sea-green glaze of a mug, when a warm voice spoke beside me. "Beautiful, isn't it? The way the glaze catches the light." I turned to see a man with eyes the color of moss after a rainstorm and a smile that seemed to start from somewhere deep inside him. Sawdust clung to the cuffs of his flannel shirt, and his hands, though clean, were clearly those of someone who worked with them. He was a furniture maker, he explained, with a small workshop just outside of town. His name was Leo Vance. He spoke of wood with the same reverence my grandfather had, a language of grain and texture I understood instinctively. Our first date was a walk through the whispering pines of Miller's Ridge, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and pine needles. We didn't just talk, we shared silences, comfortable and deep. He told me about his passion for restoring antique furniture, for giving old, forgotten pieces a new life. When he asked what I did, I gave my practiced, careful answer. "I work for a family company, Thornton and Finch. I'm in management." It wasn't a lie, but it was a carefully pruned version of the truth. Leo was close to his mother, Beatrice, who had raised him alone. "She's a force of nature," he said with an affectionate laugh as we sat on a rocky outcrop watching the sun bleed across the horizon. "Sacrificed everything for me after my dad left. She's tough, but it's because she's had to be." His devotion was touching. It spoke of a loyalty I valued, a loyalty my grandfather had held as a core principle. I fell for him with the gentle, inevitable pull of a river towards the sea. By our 5th date, I knew I was in love. 3 months later, he invited me to Sunday dinner to meet Beatrice. I chose my outfit with care, Simple jeans, a soft cashmere sweater, no jewelry that would hint at anything beyond a comfortable life. I wanted her to see me, not a projection of wealth. Beatrice Vance lived in a tidy brick bungalow in a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house was immaculate, almost sterile, with plastic runners over the carpets and an air of vigilant order. She greeted me with a polite, cool smile that didn't quite thaw the watchfulness in her eyes. "Leo has told me so much about you," she said, her gaze sweeping over me in a quick, subtle appraisal. "He says you're in management. That must be a stable career." "It is," I replied, feeling a familiar caution settle over me. "The company values its employees." Throughout the meal, a perfectly roasted chicken with crisp, flavorless vegetables, Beatrice's questions were like delicate, probing instruments. She asked about my family, my education, the size of the company, the benefits package. I answered vaguely, focusing on the company's philosophy rather than its financials. Leo, sensing my discomfort, tried to steer the conversation. "Mom, it's not an interrogation," he said, a faint blush on his cheeks. "I'm just taking an interest in the woman who has captured my son's heart," she retorted, her smile tightening. "A mother has to be concerned about her son's future, doesn't she?" Despite the unnerving introduction, my relationship with Leo deepened. He was the calm in my often overwhelming world of responsibility. He saw the part of me that was just Clara, the woman who loved the smell of rain and the feel of old books. His world was one of tangible creation, of sawdust and wood glue, and it grounded me. 8 months after we met, during a weekend trip to the coast, he proposed. We were walking on a windswept beach, the waves whispering against the sand, when he knelt in the damp twilight and presented a ring he'd made himself, a simple silver band inlaid with a thin, perfect line of dark walnut. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I know this might seem fast, but my life makes more sense with you in it. I want to build a life with you." A tremor of my grandfather's caution went through me. "Protect your roots." But as I looked into Leo's earnest, moss-green eyes, love felt like the most powerful root of all. "Yes," I whispered, tears blurring the silver line of the horizon. "Yes." That night, cocooned in the warmth of our small hotel room, the words were on the tip of my tongue. "Leo, there's something you need to know about Thornton and Finch." "About me." But a small, persistent bell of warning, the one I'd learned to heed from Grandpa Arthur, held them back. After the wedding, I promised myself, when we are bound together, when this love is our foundation, I will tell him everything. I had no idea that my silence was not a wall to protect our love, but a space in which a storm was gathering. The moment our engagement was announced, Beatrice appointed herself the unofficial director of our wedding. My vision of a small, intimate gathering in a restored barn, with wildflowers and lanterns, was met with a series of polite but firm objections. "A barn, dear," she'd said over a strained brunch. "It's a bit rustic. The Willow Creek Country Club has a much more elegant atmosphere. I know it's a significant expense, but a wedding is an investment in your future." Every conversation, no matter how it began, circled back to money. One Sunday, while Leo was in the kitchen fetching coffee, Beatrice leaned towards me, her voice a confidential whisper. "Have you two discussed your financial plans after the wedding? I've always felt that a true marriage is a complete merger. No secrets, especially when it comes to assets." "We believe in having some financial independence," I answered, choosing my words with the precision of a woodcarver. Beatrice's smile was thin as a knife's edge. "Independence is a lonely word in a marriage, Clara. Partnership is what matters." The red flags, once pale pink, were deepening to a crimson I could no longer ignore. A week later, I stopped by Leo's apartment to drop off some paperwork for our marriage license. He was at his workshop, but Beatrice, who had a key just in case of emergencies, was inside, supposedly leaving a casserole. I found her not in the kitchen, but in Leo's small home office, my folder of personal financial documents splayed open on his desk. They were statements from my private investment accounts, entirely separate from the company. She startled, fumbling to push the papers back into the folder. "Oh, Clara. You surprised me. I was just dusting and I knocked these over. Such a mess." The papers had been neatly stacked. There was no dust in sight. My heart grew cold, but I said nothing. I simply gathered my documents, my smile as tight and brittle as hers, and made a mental note to move them to a bank safe deposit box. The final, chilling piece fell into place 2 weeks before the wedding. I arrived at Leo's early for dinner and heard their voices through the door, sharp and strained. "Mom, you have to back off," Leo was saying, his tone frustrated. "Clara and I will handle our own finances." "I'm only thinking of you, Leo." Beatrice's voice was insistent, laced with a familiar, martyred tone. "You've worked so hard your whole life, while she clearly comes from a comfortable background. In a marriage, her resources become family resources. That's how a partnership works. That's not why I'm marrying her." "Of course not, darling." Beatrice's voice softened into something silky and persuasive. "You're marrying for love. But there is nothing wrong with ensuring that love is secure. Just talk to her after the wedding. Once you're legally joined, everything can be pooled. It's for the best." I backed away from the door, a profound sickness coiling in my stomach. Was Leo a part of this? Was he being manipulated, or was he a willing participant in his mother's vision of our partnership? That night, I called my best friend, Maya, a landscape architect with a no-nonsense attitude and a fierce loyalty. "Am I being paranoid?" I asked, my voice trembling as I recounted the conversation. "You're being prudent, Clara," Maya said firmly. "Beatrice sees you as a solution to a problem. Maybe a problem Leo doesn't even know he has. Have you told him about the company yet?" "No," I admitted. "I was going to wait until after the wedding." "Don't," she said, her voice unequivocal. "I know you love him, but this feels calculated. Protect yourself. Protect your grandfather's legacy. See if Leo's love is strong enough to survive the truth, not a lie." The next day, I sat in the quiet, wood-paneled office of Alastair Finch. "I need to ensure my assets, particularly the company, are ironclad before I get married," I explained, the words feeling like a betrayal of the love I felt for Leo. Alastair nodded, his expression layered with a deep, sad understanding. "Your grandfather would be proud of your foresight, Clara. Love is a beautiful thing, but it can make one blind to practicalities." We spent the afternoon reinforcing the legal fortress around Thornton and Finch. We fortified the irrevocable trust that held my shares, ensuring that no spouse, creditor, or external party could ever lay claim to them. It was a structure designed to protect the company's very soul, its employees, its mission, its history. "This feels dishonest," I confessed to Alastair, the legal documents feeling heavy in my hands. "Trust is not a switch you flip on your wedding day, Clara," he said gently. "It's built, stone by stone. Your grandfather built this company the same way. Protect the foundation first. You can show Leo the blueprints when you're certain he wants to help you build, not just live in the house." As the wedding day drew closer, my heart was a battlefield of love and fear. I saw Beatrice whispering to relatives about my good prospects and how Leo was marrying well. Each comment was a small stone, reinforcing the wall I was building around my secret. The night before our wedding, alone in my loft, I looked at the simple walnut and silver ring on my finger. Was I making a terrible mistake? I loved the man who had placed it there. But I was beginning a marriage with a secret that felt as vast and heavy as a forest. After the ceremony, I promised myself one last time, my heart aching with the duplicity of it. On our honeymoon, I'll tell him everything. I didn't know then that Beatrice had her own timeline, and it was far more aggressive than mine. Our wedding day was a masterpiece of late September light. The sun cast long, golden shadows across the grounds of the old, restored barn I'd insisted upon. Wildflowers in shades of cream, lavender, and dusty rose spilled from wooden crates, and the air smelled of hay and happiness. I wore a simple, elegant gown of heavy silk, its clean lines a quiet rebellion against Beatrice's lobbying for lace and ostentation. "You look beautiful, Clara," Maya said, helping me with the final button. "Are you ready?" "I love Leo," I said, as much to convince myself as to answer her. "The rest is just noise. We can sort through the noise later." "And the big secret?" "Our honeymoon. We're going to a quiet cabin on Mirror Lake." "I'll tell him then." I'll explain everything. Maya squeezed my hand. I think Leo is a good man, Clara. I really do. It's his mother who feels like a wolf in sheep's clothing. She's about to be my mother-in-law, I said with a sigh. I have to find a way to build a bridge. Just make sure she doesn't burn it down with you on it, Maya muttered. At the venue, Beatrice appeared in a tailored suit of pale gray that was both impeccably stylish and somehow severe. She surveyed my carefully planned, rustic elegance with a faint, tight smile. So charming, Clara. Very personal. She patted my arm. What matters is that after today, you are family. And family shares everything. Burdens and blessings. Her emphasis on the last word sent a familiar chill through me. The ceremony was a blur of heartfelt emotion. As I walked down the aisle, the love in Leo's eyes was so pure and unguarded that all my fears momentarily dissolved. His hands trembled as he took mine, and his voice was thick with sincerity as he spoke his vows. Clara, you walked into my life and made everything brighter, clearer. I promise to be your partner, your support, and your home. My heart is yours, completely and always. In that moment, I believed him. I believed in us. Whatever Beatrice's machinations, Leo's love felt like solid ground. During our first dance, swaying to a soft, acoustic melody, the secret pressed against my ribs. Leo, I have something I need to tell you, I began. What is it? He murmured, his breath warm against my ear. Before I could form the words, the music swelled, and the DJ announced it was time for the parent dances. The moment was lost. Throughout the reception, I watched Beatrice circulate, her conversations with my colleagues from Thornton and Finch, none of whom knew my true role, seeming a little too long, a little too focused. During the cake cutting, she tapped her glass for a toast. To Clara and Leo, she said, her voice clear and strong. May your union be a true partnership, and may you always share your blessings, financial and otherwise, with equal measure. The phrasing was odd, and a few guests exchanged puzzled looks. Leo shifted uncomfortably beside me. As the evening wound down, Beatrice approached us, holding a sleek leather document folder. A little wedding gift, she said, handing it to Leo. Just some paperwork to help you two get your new life organized. Nothing urgent. You can look at it tomorrow. Leo took it, his expression unreadable. Thanks, Mom. Later, as we prepared to leave for our cabin, I pulled him aside. Your mother seems very focused on our finances. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. She's just anxious. It's been her default setting since my dad left. Don't worry, I'll talk to her. Promise me, Leo, I said, taking his hands. Promise me that our decisions will be ours. Just ours. I promise, he said, his kiss soft and reassuring. It's you and me now. Always. I clung to that promise as we drove towards Mirror Lake. We arrived late, the cabin even more beautiful than the pictures. It was nestled among tall pines, with a stone fireplace and a large window overlooking the still, dark water. It's perfect, Leo whispered, wrapping his arms around me as we stood looking at the moon-dusted lake. Just us. That night, in the quiet intimacy of our marriage bed, I let go of all the noise. There were no companies, no secrets, no meddling mothers-in-law. There was only Clara and Leo, two people starting a life. For a few precious hours, everything was simple. I wish I could have frozen time right there, before the sun rose on the first day of the rest of my life. We woke to sunlight filtering through the pines, casting dappled patterns on the wooden floor. Good morning, Mrs. Vance, Leo murmured, his voice sleepy and warm. Good morning, husband, I replied, the word feeling both new and perfectly natural. I planned to tell him my secret that evening. We would hike, share a bottle of wine by the fire, and I would lay my whole life open to him. We were having breakfast on the deck when Leo's phone buzzed. He frowned at the screen. It's Mom. She says a pipe burst in my apartment. The whole place is flooding. She needs us to come back. Disappointment washed over me. Can't she call a plumber? Or the building manager? She says they need the tenant present to approve the work, he said, already standing. I'm so sorry, Clara. We can drive back up tonight. Something felt wrong, a discordant note in the morning's piece, but how could I argue with a flooding apartment? We packed our overnight bags and drove the 40 minutes back to Willow Creek. As we pulled up to his building, I saw no maintenance vans, no wet patches on the pavement, no sign of any emergency. That's odd, I commented. Maybe they fixed it fast, Leo said, though he looked puzzled too. Mom's waiting upstairs. The moment we stepped inside his apartment, I knew. The air was dry, the carpets pristine. Beatrice was sitting on the sofa, perfectly composed. Beside her sat a portly man in a suit, a briefcase on his knees. A younger woman stood near the window, a notary's stamp clearly visible on the small table beside her. My heart stopped. What's going on? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Where's the flood? My apologies for the small deception, dear, Beatrice said, her tone smooth as polished stone. But this was a matter of some urgency. A financial matter that needed to be settled. The man in the suit stood. Martin Holloway, attorney at law, he said, extending a hand I did not take. A pleasure, Mrs. Vance. What is this? Leo asked, looking from his mother to me, his face a mask of confusion. Beatrice's pleasant facade dissolved, replaced by a look of triumphant righteousness. This is about honesty, Clara. Or should I say, Ms. CEO of Thornton and Finch. The floor fell away beneath me. I saw Leo's shock, the blood draining from his face. Mom, what are you talking about? Your wife has been keeping a rather large secret, darling, Beatrice said, her eyes glittering. She's not just in management. She owns the company. An $18.4 million company. Did you really think you could hide that, Clara? I hired a private investigator the day you announced your engagement. The room spun. I looked at Leo, searching his face for any sign of complicity. Is this true, Clara? He asked, his voice strained. Before I could answer, Beatrice forged ahead. Mr. Holloway has prepared the necessary documents to transfer a portion of the company's assets into a marital trust, as is standard and fair between partners. Ms. Gable is here to notarize the signatures. Now that you are legally married, it's time to be true partners. She gestured to a thick stack of papers on the coffee table. I found my voice a thin, sharp thing. You staged this. A fake emergency, an ambush with a lawyer, the day after our wedding. Not the whole company, Mr. Holloway interjected smoothly. Just a 50% share, to be managed jointly. It's a standard postnuptial arrangement. There is nothing standard about this, I said, my shock hardening into a cold, clear anger. I turned to Leo. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. Did you know about this? He hesitated for a fraction of a second, but it was long enough. I knew Mom had concerns. She found out you were wealthier than you'd let on. But I didn't know about this. Not this. Not this. I repeated, the words like ice. What, exactly, did you know, Leo? Jason and I discussed the importance of transparency. Beatrice cut in, taking control. He agreed that all assets should be shared. Is that true? I demanded, my gaze locked on my husband. He looked trapped. Mom said it was strange you were so secretive. I agreed we should be open with each other, but I never asked for this. He gestured helplessly at the scene. But you talked about it, I said flatly. You and your mother discussed my assets behind my back. His silence was a confession. Beatrice stood, impatient. Enough of this drama. You concealed your wealth, Clara. Now it's time to make things right. She picked up a pen from the table and held it out to me. Sign the papers. It's what's best for the family. A laugh escaped me, sharp and humorless. Best for you, you mean? For the family, she repeated. Leo deserves a secure future. You owe him that. I owe him that? My voice was dangerously quiet now. The company my grandfather poured his soul into? You think I owe you a piece of his legacy? Technically, Mr. Holloway began. The trust would be structured to benefit both Mr. and Mrs. Vance. Enough, I said, cutting him off. I looked at Beatrice, the years of her quiet manipulations now laid bare. Let's be clear. You want half of my company. Her mask of maternal concern fell away completely. You owe it to him. Do you think I would let my son be married to a woman who could leave him with nothing? You will sign those papers. The notary, Ms. Gable, shifted uncomfortably. Perhaps I should return at another time. You will stay right where you are, Beatrice commanded. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling my grandfather's quiet strength settle over me. I will not be signing anything, I said, my voice calm and firm. And Mr. Holloway, I suggest you advise your client that what she is attempting constitutes coercion and potentially fraud. Had you performed even the most basic due diligence, you would know that my shares in Thornton and Finch are held in an irrevocable trust, specifically designed to prevent this exact scenario. Your documents are worthless. Mr. Holloway blanched. I was not made aware of the trust. Clearly, I said. I turned back to Leo, who stood frozen, looking as though the world had cracked open at his feet. And you? Was this part of the plan all along, Leo? Marry the quiet girl from the family company and hope for a payday. No, he choked out, his voice raw. Clara, I swear, I didn't know about the company, the money. Mom just said you were hiding something. I never imagined. But you went along with her secrecy, I said, the heartbreak a physical ache in my chest. You let her sow suspicion between us. I picked up my purse from the floor. I have to go. Beatrice stepped in front of me. If you walk out that door, this marriage is over. I paused, looking her directly in the eye. The marriage was over the moment you hired a private investigator, Beatrice. I looked one last time at my husband of less than 24 hours. His face was a ruin of confusion and regret. I thought you were different, I said softly to him. I thought we were. Then I walked out, the click of the closing door sounding like the final word in a story that had just begun. The drive was a blur of tears and shaking hands. I ended up, as I knew I would, on Maya's doorstep. She took one look at my face, my wedding dress still hanging in the back of my car, and pulled me into her arms. What did she do? She asked, her voice low and furious. I told her everything, the fake flood, the lawyer, Beatrice's triumphant declaration. That manipulative, venomous. Maya paced her living room, her anger a comforting fire. And Leo? Where was he in all this? He just stood there, I whispered, the memory twisting like a knife. He was surprised, but he knew something. He let her do it. Call Alistair. Now, she commanded. This is exactly what your grandfather warned you about. I stayed in Maya's guest room that night. My phone lit up with 17 missed calls and a dozen increasingly desperate texts from Leo. Clara, please, it's not what it looked like. Mom manipulated me. I love you. I don't care about the money. I couldn't bring myself to answer. The beautiful, simple ring he had made for me felt like a brand on my finger. I slipped it off and placed it on the bedside table. The next morning, Alistair Finch greeted me in his office, his expression grim but kind. First, he said, before I could even speak, let me assure you, the company is safe. Utterly. What they attempted was amateurish and legally impotent. Relief washed through me, a brief respite from the storm of my emotions. So, what now? Now, he said, leaning forward, we decide what you want to do about your marriage. We can file for an annulment based on fraud. We can file for divorce. Or, he paused, you can find out the extent of Leo's complicity. He knew she was investigating me, I insisted. Or he was told a version of the story that played on his fears and his loyalty to his mother, Alistair countered gently. Only you can decide, Clara, if the man you fell in love with is a victim in this, or a co-conspirator. I took a week. I hid from the world, let my capable team at Thornton and Finch run the company, and tried to sift through the wreckage of my heart. Leo sent a long, handwritten letter, pages filled with remorse and explanation. He claimed Beatrice had convinced him I was in some kind of financial trouble, that her investigation was to protect him from taking on my secret debts. He said he never imagined the truth was the opposite. It sounded plausible. It also sounded convenient. After 3 days of silence, I sent a single text message. We need to talk. My lawyer's office. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Bring your mother. He and Beatrice arrived looking like two sides of a coin. Leo was haggard, his face etched with sleepless nights. Beatrice was composed, her posture rigid with defiance. Alistair sat beside me, a silent, formidable presence. Before we begin, I said, my voice steady, I want the absolute truth. Yes, I am the majority owner and CEO of Thornton and Finch. I kept it private because my grandfather taught me that wealth can distort relationships. It seems he was right. If you had been honest, Beatrice began. Mom, stop, Leo cut her off, his voice raw. He turned to me, his eyes pleading. Clara, I didn't know. I swear it. I love you. They argued then, a tangled, ugly airing of their dysfunctional dynamic. He accused her of manipulating him with lies about my finances. She accused him of being naive. As I listened, the final piece of the puzzle slid into place. This wasn't just about securing Leo's future. It was about Beatrice. Beatrice, I interrupted, my voice cutting through their argument. Why? Why all this? Her composure finally cracked. For a moment, I saw a flicker of raw desperation in her eyes. I was protecting my son. By trying to seize control of my company? I pressed. That's not protection. That's acquisition. Her shoulders slumped. You don't understand, she whispered. When his father left, we lost everything. The house, the savings. I've been in debt ever since. Medical bills, a second mortgage to help with his student loans. Leo stared at her, stunned. You told me you were fine. That insurance covered everything. It didn't, she admitted, the truth finally spilling out. I'm drowning. When I found out about your company, I thought it could be a life raft. For both of us. The silence in the room was profound. It wasn't just about greed. It was about fear. Decades of it. I looked at Leo, whose world had just been upended by his mother's confession. And you? I asked him quietly. Where do you stand now, Leo? He met my gaze, his own clear for the first time. I love you, Clara. Not your company. Not your money. You. And I am so sorry I let my mother's fears poison what we have. He then turned to Beatrice. And Mom, this has to stop. My life is with Clara now. If she'll have me, our marriage has to be our own. Beatrice looked at her son, truly seeing his independence for the first time, and crumpled. The choice was mine. To walk away from the man I loved, tainted by this betrayal, or to see if we could build something new from the ruins. I need time, I said, my voice shaking slightly. This isn't a wound that can be healed in an afternoon. As we left, Beatrice stopped me. I am sorry, Clara, she said, her voice stripped of its usual artifice. Desperation is a terrible thing. It wasn't absolution, but it was a start. 6 months later, Jason and I stood in the quiet, sunlit space of our loft. The journey back to each other had been slow and deliberate. It involved therapy, both individual and as a couple. It involved a postnuptial agreement, drafted by Alistair, that legally and emotionally separated my legacy from our shared future. Most importantly, it involved honesty. Leo had spent weeks at Thornton and Finch, not as an owner, but as a student, learning the history, meeting the artisans, understanding that the company was a living entity, a community. He had to understand what he had almost helped destroy. Beatrice, for her part, was in therapy for financial trauma and had begun the long process of untangling her debts with a credit counselor. She had sent a formal, notarized apology, renouncing any and all interest in my life or assets. Our interactions were few, formal, but respectful. A new, healthier foundation was being laid, one stone at a time. One evening, as we cooked dinner together, the easy silence between us was a testament to the work we'd done. I was thinking about my grandfather, I said, stirring a pot of soup that filled the kitchen with the scent of rosemary. He taught me to protect my roots. Following his advice is what saved us. Leo came and stood behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He was right. Hiding the company, it forced the poison to the surface before it could seep into the foundations. Our marriage hadn't started with a fairy tale honeymoon, but with a painful, cleansing fire. It had burned away the illusions, the manipulations, the unhealthy dependencies. What was left was fragile, but it was real. We were not the same people who had stood in that barn and exchanged vows. We were stronger, more honest, our love tempered by a crisis that could have shattered it. The future was not a guaranteed happily ever after. It was something we would have to build together, day by day, with care, respect, and a hard-won wisdom. And as I leaned back into my husband's embrace, I knew that this This real, imperfect, tested love was a legacy worth protecting just as much as my grandfather's. It was a different kind of artisanal good, crafted not from wood, but from the more difficult materials of forgiveness and trust.